Hello and welcome to the Last Looks podcast, a show where we catch up with talented hairstylists and makeup artists in the film and television industry. We'll pick their super creative brains and find out all the good stuff. Join me, your host, Jamie Lee, in finding out what's what in the hair and makeup departments around the world.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Welcome back, Yvonne.
Hi, Jamie. It's nice to be back.
Now tell me, what makes the Hask Hair Care brand different?
Hask is all about creating, treating, and maintaining gorgeous, healthy hair. We offer complete problem solution product regimens featuring exotic ingredients from around the world and designed to repair, revitalize, refresh, and restore an extensive range of hair types. Everything from argan for repairing, coconut for hydration, keratin for smoothing, to biotin for volume, tea tree for scalp care, blue chamomile for blondes, and hemp for mega moisture.
I feel nourished just hearing those ingredients.
Our mission is simple: to create high-quality hair care that's carefully sourced, tested for efficacy, and formulated without any of the bad stuff, including sulfates, parabens, phthalates, glutens, and aluminum starch. The brand is also cruelty-free and Leaping Bunny certified. And because of our ingredient-inspired fragrances, the products smell absolutely incredible.
Well, that all sounds good to me. Thanks for joining me, Yvonne.
Jamie, it was a pleasure. And I will leave you and your listeners in the industry with this. The Hask brand welcomes the opportunity to continue building our relationship with the Hollywood styling community. If we can support a project you're working on, send us an email, as we'd be happy to help.
That's awesome.
We can be reached at hask@stonemanagement.net. Thanks again, Jamie.
And now, our feature presentation.
Today, I'm speaking with makeup prosthetic designer Mike Marino from Prosthetic Renaissance. You would have seen Mike's work on Black Swan, True Detective, and The Goldfinch. Also, Mike and his team are responsible for helping Heidi Klum get ready for Halloween each year. We chat about being mentored by the legend Dick Smith, getting to work with some of his idols, and how he approaches his work now, remembering their influences.
Pictures up. Last looks. Rolling. And action.
Welcome to the Last Looks podcast, Mike.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Hey, good, thank you. Now, I would like you to finish this sentence for me, okay?
Okay.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named Mike, and when he grew up, he wanted to be...
A guy who had heads on his shelf.
But not in a weird way. No,
and
not in a weird way.
I didn't know what that meant, but I just wanted that.
Did you see a picture of it somewhere? Like, what inspired that thought?
Well, after I saw the Elephant Man film, I was like 4 years old. I was completely destroyed by that film. And I was so deathly afraid of that film that later on did I realize that it was makeup. And then I found out who did these kinds of makeups. And then I, of course, found out who Rick Baker was when Thriller was out. And they showed the making of Thriller. And I was completely obsessed with Rick Baker, and that he had all of these heads on his shelf and in the background. And Michael Jackson's talking about, you know, this head here and this head here. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I need that. I need to have that. I want to put it, you know, on my bedroom wall.
That is so cool. So obviously you're watching films and getting engrossed in them and trying to probably figure out how it was all done. So when did you actually start getting your hands on some makeup and playing around with stuff?
I think the first makeups I did were based on Dick Smith's makeup handbook that I got from the library.
Yeah.
Because once I was, you know, I found out who Rick Baker was. I found out more about, you know, who his mentor was. And I was like obsessed with, okay, who's Dick Smith? And I found out who Dick Smith was. And I happened to stumble upon his book about do-it-yourself makeup. It was a hardcover and it was in the library along with Richard Corson's stage makeup. And I I rented those books and I basically never returned them. You know, they were constantly being renewed, like for years. Because we didn't have then, Amazon or something, and you can't just order whatever you wanted. It was like, okay, I have to go to the library, and I wanted to get those books and not have anyone else have them because I was afraid if someone had them, they'd do the same thing I did and never return them. So I kept renewing the library books over and over again. So that lasted a really long time, and I think I tried to do the Dick Smith makeups, and towards the end of the book, it gets really complicated. So it took a while to do those. So those were really like the first things I ever did. And I was probably, I don't even think I was 11 yet. I was already at age, 5 and 6, 7, 8, all those years, like obsessed with makeup. I just didn't know that I could do it yet, until I went to the library, So if their libraries still exist, I think people should still go there because there's things you may discover that you don't even know exist,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember going to the library for hair reference, for, period stuff and all that type of thing because there wasn't Google, so.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I'm guessing that you had parents that were pretty encouraging in this situation, like helping you find the tools and products and stuff that you needed to create?
They were encouraging that they kind of left me alone.
Right.
But they weren't really like, okay, we're going to go hike all the way over here and buy this thing. It wasn't really like that. It was like, okay, do not come in my room. And if you do, I'm going to kill you. So leave me alone and let me watch my VHS tapes and analyze and pause every single frame to see what tool Rick Baker's holding.
Yeah.
So I don't, what's that thing he's spraying with the red handle? What is that? I don't know what that is. I think it's an airbrush. I found out about airbrushing. And what sculpting tool is he using? I have no idea what that is. And I have to say, I really learned a lot when I found the Berman catalog back in it had to be the early 90s, where they had like a booklet where they gave you a little description on what every material was and kind of did. And I literally memorized that manual, that catalog, and I really learned what you could use before I even used those materials. So slowly over time, I graduated into ordering a lot of the materials, even weird stuff like Skin Flex and all these urethanes and all this stuff that they don't even make anymore. So I was an expert at just describing to you what could be done, with what material, because I memorized the booklet, a manual.
That's very cool. Thank goodness they brought that out, huh? Otherwise you would have just still been going, what is that? What is he using? What is
exactly.
that?
And it never worked the way you wanted it to work either, because the material it'd be like, okay, well, I ran out of it. Now I spilled it all over my rug. And I didn't know I could only mix a little bit. I mixed the whole damn thing up and it exploded all over the table, So that's basically my rug in my bedroom growing up was absolutely destroyed.
That must have made your mother very happy.
Well, they knew I was into it. So we moved into a new house and they left the old rug in that room because they knew I was going to destroy it. I mean, we're talking about plaster embed into the carpet, completely ruining every bit of that room.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome. So you're doing this at 10, 11, 12. Who are you doing makeups on?
So I had a friend, his name was Chris, and he went to my school, and I knew I had to be friends with him because he had an eyeball in his sandwich one day. And he was eating and making believe it wasn't there, and all the girls were freaking out. And and I was like, okay, well, who is this kid? I need to be friends with this kid. So I don't think he thought he was capable of doing any kind of artistic thing, and I was already so into it. So he was basically my guinea pig, my model for everything. So I had a friend who just wanted to be in makeup so he could scare people.
Yeah.
So I would do everything. I did old age makeups on him and scars and wounds and burns and all these things. And poor kid, I mean, he's definitely, I remember putting a cotton and latex thing on his face and it literally would not come off. I didn't know how to remove it. And it was just like a nightmare. But I needed to do that. I think the best thing I learned is that I had to try it and kind of mess it up so that I would know that, oh, I couldn't do that again. It was like this, I didn't really quite take notes, but I had this really vast memory of what I could and couldn't do. And I would always remember.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for Chris.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome. So at what point, like you go through high school and everything, at what point do you start really getting into it as in training, or did you just go out to work straight away, or?
Well, I think I was about 16 at some point, and I remember attempting anyway, doing a prosthetic. I think it was like my first prosthetic makeup. From everything from sculpting to molding to running foam latex and all this stuff. I was about 16 years old, and it was terrible makeup. It was so bad. I mean, it was like barely like the foam latex even held its shape. It wasn't even gelled. It was, it was a mess, and it was just really bad. Nothing worked out the way I wanted it to work out, but I guess was halfway decent because I took all these notes on everything that I did, and I submitted it into like some Joe Blasco contest that they advertise in like Fangoria. And they, and a few months go by, and like I don't know, I think it was like third place, fourth place, something. I won. I wasn't even old enough to enter the contest because they had like a age restriction, and I just lied. I lied or something and said I was older, and they gave me some honorary scholarship to Joe Blasco School. And, I was still in high school, I think it was like a junior or something, and I didn't go, but I was like, okay, this is a little bit encouraging, so maybe I should keep doing this.
Yeah.
So it was kind of cool that way. And then I was like, I really would love to train with Dick Smith like Rick Baker did, because, I was totally obsessed with Rick Baker.
Of course.
So I found his address in high school, and I wrote him a letter. I sent him a portfolio, and he wrote me a postcard back and said, I always remember what it said. It said, "Dear Mike, thanks for the extensive portfolio. Please give me a call anytime except dinner, 6:30 to 7:30. All the best, Dick." That was the postcard I got. I think I was like a senior in high school or something like that. And I totally freaked out. I was like, okay, this shit just got real. Like, oh God, like now I was so excited and, wanted to talk to Dick Smith. I was like, I don't even know what to say. I was like, okay, now I got to be really serious.
Yeah.
So all my doubts were like kind of like thrown out the window entirely, and it was like, okay, well, he even looked at my package and my work that I had at that point. So he must think that I don't want to waste his time. So that's how that went.
So you call him, but not at dinner time.
Yeah, exactly. Which is so awesome because it's like so specific, it's so specific. And I called him, and he had my book with him, and he went through it with me and literally stayed on the phone with me. So a strange kid, from New York. I think he was living in Sarasota, Florida at that time. Okay. Stayed on the phone with me for like 2 hours.
Wow.
And I didn't ask him about anything like, oh, how did you do this thing in The Exorcist? Or I didn't ask him any of that. It was more like, okay, I have this problem. I can't get foam latex to gel. I can't do this. So he would go into the reasons why and how to assess how to do that. Okay, he used an analogy I remember where he was in the Army or something, and he said, well, you're firing at practice, and you're launching this thing across the field, and you say, okay, well, that was too far, and then you shoot one again, and it shoots really not far enough. So you gauge between the not far enough and the far enough, and where do I need to land in between? That's just like foam latex. I was like, okay, well, that's really cool. So it was like, okay, over gel it and under gel the foam latex, and then you'll find the timing and how to know when to put it in so that you could have time to put it in your molds so it gels on time. So it was like, it was always an analogy with Dick. And he would go into these long stories of analogies, and it was amazing to hear him speak because, it's like speaking to, your grandfather who's like your idol, so it's like he had this really amazing way of describing and helping explain to the strange kid who was interested in makeup how to do a certain thing. And that really kind of changed my thinking and my approach onto how to approach a problem, because everything is a problem. Every single thing is a problem. If it was really easy, then everyone would do it. So it was really get down to, okay, we know you like makeup and we know you're pretty good. Okay, let's get better. So that was where high school, I really started taking it serious, and I knew that I would send him photographs and I knew that he would be looking at them. So I really started taking it seriously, and he was brutally honest, and that was so helpful. And I try to help everybody that emails me or sends me a message or something. I try to be as honest as Dick was honest to me, because that honesty really helps you push yourself, and it also deters people who aren't serious. So it's a lot of work. It's not exactly glamorous. It's dirty. You're going to mess things up. You're going to waste money, and it was that way, and I mean, there were things he would say to me like, oh my God, I really love this. I really love what you did here. And I remember one time they did some makeup and it was gelatin. It was weird, like blue color. And he goes, I don't know what this is. Was this colored with dirt? And I was like, oh my God, this is killing me. Okay, I will never paint that thing like that. I need to learn about colors and all this stuff. So it was like, if he didn't say that, I wouldn't have learned what to do and what not to do. Yeah. I would just think, oh, well, he thinks I'm awesome. So, great.
That's so cool. You must have been just such a sponge. Oh my God. Just soaking.
Completely. Everything. And I found a way to record our conversation. So I have a lot of them on tape. Like, my friend, it's so crazy. I like my friend Chris, who I used to practice makeup on. His dad was like a New York City detective, and he had all this like spy equipment. So he actually had this phone recorder that used to put on the earpiece so that you can record the conversation. So I got one of those from him. And when Dick Smith called back, or I called him, I would know to go on this very specific phone that I would put the recording on the earpiece and record everything that he was saying, because I would rewind it and go back and listen to everything that he said just in case I missed what he was talking about.
Oh my goodness, that is so amazing. So you still have those recordings now?
I do, yeah, I do.
Oh, that's so cool. What an ingenious little child you were. Oh my goodness.
I knew. I was like, okay, he speaks really fast, and even though he explains well, I'm totally going to mess something up, so I need to literally memorize what he's saying.
Right. Did you at any point let him know that you were recording the conversation?
Completely not. No chance, because I was afraid that he wouldn't want me to do it and sell it or something, So I was like, okay, I'm just going to secretly do this. And, I never gave it to anybody. I mean, I sound like this little wimpy little dork who doesn't know anything, laughing and stuff, at stupid jokes and everything. And I would never want anyone to hear that.
I know, but it must be so amazing to listen back to it, like listen to younger you. Just
it's embarrassing.
And so, but you must sound so excited and passionate, and it's awesome.
I don't know. Maybe one day I'll listen to it, but
I think you'll be surprised at how much you actually enjoy listening to it. You'll have a smile from ear to ear.
Right. I'll take it out.
So did you do formal training at all?
No, nothing. I just had Dick Smith talk to me on the phone, and that was basically it.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Full stop, really, isn't it? I mean,
I was so obsessed that, at that point I thought that there was no school. I mean, there's not really schools. There weren't schools back then really that, were maybe like the schools now. I think the schools now are a lot better and they know a lot of things. But back then in the early 90s, it was, kind of limited. And I already had my laboratory in my bedroom and I had Dick Smith. So it was like, what better could I do? I knew Greg Canham and Rick Baker and Kevin Yeager, all idols of mine, like all trained basically that way, was speaking to Dick and showing him the work and all that. And it's like, well, why can't I do that? So I'm going to just do that. And that was really my own formal training. But I did also have the fortune of living like 2 towns over from Maron Makeup, which they, Maron. I mean, they make all this tons of makeup and everything. And I worked there when I was 16. I worked in the back, like stock area. And like, I used to fill up all like the containers of makeup on the machines and all these things, and I did that. Cool. It was my first job ever. 16 years old, and I used to do that. And, I was like, okay, well, this is makeup, so I want to be involved somehow. Even I don't want to work at a car wash. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to work at the makeup company, which was cool because the owner, his name was Marty Mellick. He was really cool. He let me, come in when I could after school and learn there. And at the same time, he had like a little display room, and most of it was like clowns and stuff. But he did have appliances that Dick was experimenting with in silicone back in the early 90s.
Oh, wow.
So I was like totally obsessed with looking at that stuff. He had them in a box. I think Dick was making like made up like some chins and some noses and things and gave them just so that they could try to find a makeup that could cover the silicone and all these things. It was just sort of an experiment. And I was able to look at all that stuff and feel it, early tests of silicone back in the day. And I knew Dick Smith had a material, a grease paint that he would talk about in the makeup course, which was so strange. It was called mask cover. It was like a rubber mask grease paint. But I never could get that to ever work because it was so hard and like so stiff that I couldn't get the makeup to come out of it, So it was like, I don't know, something went wrong, So either I was using really old stuff, but anyway, but I worked there and I loved working there because it was close to like Dick Smith, So
That's very cool. So did you ever get to meet Dick Smith?
I did. I only met him, though. He lived in Florida, but I only met him at the makeup artist trade show conventions. And that was a really amazing convention, especially back in the day, because everybody that I idolized was there. They'd show up. It would be, like Kevin. I don't know if Kevin ever went, Kevin Yeager, but I love Kevin Yeager stuff, Tales from the Crypt, all that. But Dick Smith would show up. Rick Baker would be there, and I remember meeting Dick there for the very first time. And that was a really cool thing that Michael Key put together. He kind of put together this network of people like coming in, meeting and talking and seeing each other's work and all that. And it was kind of a one of a kind thing, especially in the late 90s. I think it was 97 or something was the first one.
Yeah.
And I went to every one of them every year. So that's when I would kind of see Dick Smith in person other than talking to him on the phone. And that's where I also met Kazu for the first time because I met Kazu on AOL in some like makeup, like chat room or something. And because I had on my profile, Dick Smith, and he said, "Oh, you like Dick Smith?" and blah, blah, blah. And I became friends with Kazu via the internet for, I think it was like 1996 or 7. He just got to America, and I've been friends with him for like 25 years now.
That's so crazy.
That's amazing. It was crazy. I would meet him too at the trade show. It was like, just out of high school, it was really an awesome, exciting time.
Absolutely. And it's so amazing that you made these connections, even though back then it was so much more difficult than it is today. Oh,
totally. Totally. I didn't live in LA. I didn't move there until later on, which I did move there in end of 2000, I believe. I moved to LA. I worked at Optic Nerve Studios. I worked at where they used to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, all those TV shows, and I learned a lot from there. And that was the first time I really got to work, with like people I idolized, like Norman Cabrera was there and, all these guys. And I was like, okay, now I cannot fuck up. Like I am working side by side with Norman Cabrera. Holy shit. This is ridiculous. And like, I still didn't even know like really how to sculpt. I was still learning. So probably the stuff I sculpted was garbage, somebody had to fix it or something, But John Vulich owned the company, and it was really awesome that he let me work there. He loved this one mask in particular that I had sculpted. It was like this demonic-looking half mask, and he was like, "Okay, you're hired. Where have you been?" And I was like, "Oh, fuck, awesome." Then I started working there. I was like, "Okay, I don't know what I'm doing." And
I think that's so cool. So often, someone gives you that break to just go, "I see talent there. Come with me. Let's expand on this."
Oh, I was so fortunate.
Yeah. And you were in the workshop, so you're full-time in there?
Yeah, well, I worked at a bunch of different places. I worked at a guy named Vincent Guastini's studio. He did, a few movies here and there, and he's a really funny, wild guy who kind of let the younger guys do a lot of stuff with him, and it was just really fun. I had a lot of fun there. And I would jump around from his studio to Optic Nerve to Screaming Mad George's studio. and Rob Bottin's, and I had worked at Rob Bottin's for a few weeks. And it was like basically the last film that Rob ever worked on, from my knowledge. It was a film called Mr. Deeds. I called one day and they picked up, which I always would call. I would call everybody. I had Dick Smith's list of studio numbers that he used to give to people that took his correspondence course. But before I had the course, Dick gave me the numbers to everyone's studio, and it had everyone on there. And I had cool. Bart Mixon and Earl Ellis's company and Kevin Yeager's studio and address and K&B, and everybody's numbers were on this like piece of paper that I used to hold in plastic and like worship, and I would call these studios every once in a while. So even when I moved to LA, I still had that list, and I called Bottin's and someone picked up. And I said, hey, you guys, looking for sculptors? And they said, well, how did you know? And I go, I didn't know. And they go, you're lying. And I was like, no, I'm not lying. I swear, I don't know. I didn't know. I'm just calling. We're like, well, yeah, we are looking for someone. Like, can you come in for an interview? And I said, okay, cool. They said, what's your name? And blah, blah, blah. And like, I guess they did some research. And I think someone from Optic Nerve, like, vouched for me. Someone in the lab said, oh, yeah, Mike works here at John's, Vulich's. So yeah, he's not bullshitting. So he works there. He's good. He's young, go. So I went for an interview there, and I brought my portfolio of everything that I thought looked halfway decent at that time. And I met with an assistant of Rob's. Name was Chris Heater. And then Rob came in. I showed him my stuff. I said, okay, Rob will be here soon. And Rob came. And then Rob Bottin came, and, he's 7 feet tall, basically. He's this huge guy, and he's like, hey, man, what's up? I'm Rob. And I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. And, I'm Mike, and blah, blah, blah. And, and I showed him my portfolio. And I actually, in New York, before I moved to LA, I worked at Saturday Night Live. I worked there in 1998, 1999, and the half of 2000. So I had some experience with actors and some makeups and things that we did with Louis Zakarian, who's a really cool guy. He's still over at SNL, NBC.
That's very cool.
And I showed Rob my book, and he goes, oh, SNL, this is cool. He's like, I told him Dick Smith, and he goes, oh, I'm a huge Dick Smith fan. And there were a few things in my portfolio. He was like, man, that's cool. What is that? It was like this giant hand I sculpted in a fist, for this movie called Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back that I did at Vincent Guastini's studio. And he was like, that's really realistic. Like, that's cool, man. He's like, okay, well, when can you start? And I was like, whenever you want. He goes, can you start right now? I was like, okay, yeah. So I went in for an interview, and then I just stayed there for like 12 hours. Yeah, it was crazy. That's awesome. It was nuts. And it was like he was building these multiple different swollen feet for Mr. Deeds. And I sculpted one of the feet, or two of them, an appliance and some other swollen foot. And Rob would come in to that room I was sculpting in and sculpt with me. And it was me and Rob spending like hours upon hours sculpting together back and forth. And he would leave. It was his birthday. I remember it was April. He would leave and then come back in. And then he'd come back in and be like, okay, hey, this weird life cast I have, it's like this really little guy's hands. And I was like, look how the skin is all buckling and it's all weird. He goes, let's try that. So I was like, okay, so I'll try that. So I would try this weird thing, and then an hour or two go by, and then he'd come back in and be like, oh, I liked it better the other way. And then I was like, okay, so I changed it back to the other way. And it was like continuously being worked on for days, And I think that he was kind of testing me to see how much patience I had before, because I learned from Dick Smith, and I had like no experience basically up in like working in studios. I was so fresh. So I worked there, and Dick Smith told me, never be wed to anything you sculpted. He goes, if you work on something for a week or whatever, a really long time, and then you leave the room and you come back and something tells you it doesn't feel quite right, he goes, don't be afraid to destroy it and do it over.
Wow. So
I was like, okay, well, that's how you do it. I didn't know any other way. So when Rob kind of did that to me, I was like, oh yeah, totally. No offense. I don't care. I'll wreck it. I'll start over.
Yeah.
And that was continuous. And I think he really liked that because I was really open to receiving that kind of direction.
Yeah, and just being open to that change, because I mean that's a hard thing for some people to deal with.
Totally.
Like they're just like, no, what do you mean? It's perfect. Believe it.
Exactly. Completely. And I had that mindset forever. I still have it because I am not afraid to change something even at the last minute. And I still do that to try to make it as good as possible. Even on our tight deadlines we have now, like literally I'm still changing stuff if I have to, like the night before, so, and I learned that from Dick Smith and I learned that from Bottin. And then he never did another show really. And he kind of retired after that. And we talked so much. He would tell me about stories from The Thing and The Howling and all these things. And also about how this company owed him money and he wasn't going to show up with this stuff. And they were kind of messing with him. And he was really kind of getting fed up with, the financial situation of it all because they didn't pay him and they owed him money. And he came in one morning and said, "You want to go to Aspen?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, cool. I'll go." He's like, I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, this foot stuff. I don't want to go." And he goes, "They owe me like 30 grand. And if they don't pay me, I ain't showing up with this shit." So I'm like, okay. And he goes, "Do me a favor, sculpt the end of this foot really thick, like a 1/2 inch thick." And I go, "Okay, why?" He goes, "Because I don't want them to think that they can shoot it like a makeup. It has to be like a sock." So like a guy could Adam Sandler could slip it on his foot and it would be like they can't pull up his leg further than, this certain point. So I was like, okay, so I sculpted this really thick edge, and that was basically, I don't even know if it was in the movie. I can't, it's shown so quickly. It's like this frostbitten, swollen foot that's all black and stuff. And it's really crispy looking, but I don't know if that's the stuff we made. I just don't know who filmed it. I don't know who did it. I have no idea. And that was kind of the last I've spoken to him.
Wow. But how amazing to have these opportunities. Like,
God.
So exciting. And to think now that, I mean, you're in a position now that I'm sure plenty of talented artists coming up look at your work and I just say, oh man, I got to get in the room with Mike Marino. This has got to happen.
Oh, it's an honor. I mean, it's really something I'm trying to follow in a tradition of, because people helped me and I'll help people too. I mean, but there is a lot of competition and you have to try so hard at what you do because there's someone next to you that's really good and really trying harder. So I really have to choose who really wants it the most, So, it's not anything personal. And there's a lot of people that try and I try to always advise, always. I never take one email and turn it down. If I see it, I respond, just like Dick did. But I learned so much. And years later, when Dick passed away and I lost touch with Rob, I was like, man, like that's really hyper rare, for anybody to do and take time and, explain their thinking process. And so that's really, really rare. It really didn't come along much later on. I thought, oh, everyone's like that. But nobody was like that.
Yeah.
And even with Bottin, it was even though I learned a lot of artistic things with him, I learned business. Even in these small stories he would talk to me about getting screwed over and make sure you have a contract and make sure it says this. And a lot of it was business, so even though all we really all want to do is be artistic and try to deal with, what we're dealing with, whatever kind of makeup it is, whether it be, beauty makeup and any of it, you still have to delegate and learn how to do business because we can get taken advantage of. We can get screwed over, and I even knew that Dick Smith got screwed over and Rob Bottin got screwed over. And it was like, okay, I really need to learn business too. Yeah. That's really important.
It is. And just the whole management of people as well. I mean,
absolutely.
We're all creative artists. And then on top of it, if you have a company like yourself or heading departments or whatever, there's like people management going on in the middle of all of that. And you're dealing with people who are creatives and who are artists. And I feel like sometimes that people management can be a little more sensitive sometimes because of that.
100%. Yeah. And I have to look at it in a realistic way. I mean, as sensitive as I can be and understanding, I'm also like, oh, hell no. Yeah. You're not doing that. And no, goodbye.
Yeah.
It's got to be the way, in the end, the producer, he doesn't know or care that I have, 10 to 20 people working for me. Yeah. It's, Mike Marino gets the blame if something goes wrong. Or Mike Marino gets the credit if, it looks good, So I really try everything I do to sculpt myself, to glue on myself, to paint myself, to figure out all of that. And when I can't, I have very few selective people, guys like Mike Fontaine and people who I know I can trust and to delegate certain things I cannot do. And I love hiring really good artists, but they really have to adapt to the way I need it to be done because I operate like Dick Smith used to tell me how to operate and I operate how Bottin would tell me how to operate. So I have a thing in my studio that I can sculpt something and I ask, hey, Mike, why don't you work on it for a little bit and then I'll work on it. Or if he's sculpting something, I will jump in and sculpt something on top of his sculpture. So it's like completely like this is a team thing. None of this is personal. I can jump in and absolutely scratch up Mike's sculpture or someone's sculpture, wreck it, move it around, and he can do the same for me if he feels like that it could be better. So we kind of have a open thing there. And I like to have people that are open to that kind of thinking because in the end, it's a team thing and it is not a egotistically driven thing. We're providing a product that needs to look as good as possible. And my studio operates that way. So if someone takes offense or is that kind of touchy kind of way, then it may not be a person for me.
Yeah.
Because Rob would do that. Rob would come in and just smear stuff around. And John Vulich would do that at Optic Nerve. He would go over to every single person's station with his cigarette in his mouth and go over and smear around the sculpture with his fingers and thumbs and smash it up and move it around. And I tell you, everything I've seen him adjust looked better.
Yeah.
John had this very hands-on touch about his work that seems organic that I picked up on. And I always thought that was the way. But later on did I know that a lot of people are very touchy and don't touch the sculpture. And I can't operate that way. I learned from John. I learned from Rob. I learned from Dick how to do that way. Yeah. And that's what I still do.
Yeah. It's being adaptable, isn't it? I mean,
you have to.
You have to. And I love that it's such a team collaboration in your workshop. That sounds awesome.
It's fun. It's stressful too. I mean, there's a lot of things that I do that, business-wise, that pulls me away from the creative side of my brain. And it's very difficult. So I've really learned to sculpt and to deal with things while having conversations, so I'll be sculpting at my table and have, person in the office come in or someone from the shop and stand at the doorway and go, okay, this, and this. And I'm still talking about it, so I've literally adapted to working that way and being distracted constantly because you cannot sit in a room for 5 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours without being distracted or a question being asked.
Yeah.
Really
just that
hard.
Multitasking. Yeah. And you're wearing different hats. I mean, you're the artist, you're the manager, you're the business guy, you're the money man, it's just like so many hats juggling.
Absolutely. Completely. And I learned over the years, I'm like, as you're younger, you're like, oh, well, that makeup sucks. I don't like that. That doesn't work. It's like, as I got older, I'm like, oh, I can't judge anybody's work because who knows the circumstance they were in? Who knows if they had 2 days to make this? Who knows if their foam latex failed? Who knows if the producer was an asshole? Who knows if they never paid him? It's like, okay, well, I am very sensitive to people's work. And we all know everyone tries their best.
Yeah.
So, that's the way it is, and I just try my best. That's all I can do.
Well, I think your best is pretty good, Mike. So I think you're doing okay.
and we've worked together too before a couple times.
We have. And it's always a pleasure.
I love working with you. And I learned things from you, watching you cut hair and seeing what you did with our last test that we did in LA on some project that I can't mention. But it was awesome. And, you know, and I could see right away that, hey, do you want me to cut this? Hey, do you want, and I was like, oh, I could totally work with you. It's not saying you're not sensitive, you know? So, okay, great. Oh yeah. Can you thin it out more? Can you cut this more? Can you do that? You know, it's like, and look, standing back, I'm a pain in the ass. I realize it. I torture wig makers. I torture everybody.
I didn't feel tortured at all. I'll just let you know that.
Good. But I do. I know that I do. I torture everybody, but it all serves the purpose of, can you do this as best as you can and give me the option of changing it and adapting to what we need? You know, so anyway, it's great working with you.
So let's talk about some of the work that you have done over the past few years, because, I mean, your resume is pretty incredible and what's been coming out of your studio. So you have a company. Let's talk about how the company started, Prosthetic Renaissance. How did that start?
It's a really interesting story. In 1997 or 1998, I got a recommendation from Tony Timpone, the editor of Fangoria magazine at the time, to meet these directors. They were young guys and they were doing a film. This director, he was doing a film, him and his producer, and would I be interested in doing the effects for it? I was like, oh yeah, totally. You know, then I met the director. He came to my house, which my lab was still in my parents' house in my bedroom. You know,
Awesome.
so it was, I think it was 97. And I hadn't like moved into, you know, this garage area that my dad had built specifically for me because, yes, he was an awesome guy, but he also built it to get me out of the house because I was fucking up his house.
Yeah.
You know, so I had this little garage and all that, which was built later on. But in 97, I was still in my parents' house in my bedroom. So I had these young guys come over, 3 people. It was a director and 2 producers. And we went over the script and the effects, and I gave them a breakdown. And I think it was like this ridiculous thing I figured out how to break down. I mean, I priced out everything from like Vaseline to like fucking everything. It was so ridiculous, you know, but it was Eli Roth. It was the director, Eli Roth, and he was a young guy starting to make a movie. He's trying to make this movie called Cabin Fever, you know, and which became kind of like a big success for him and all that. And I think he ultimately went to LA and used somebody from K&B Shop or something, and that was their relationship because he was from New York and was trying to make the film in New York.
Ah, right.
And then couldn't, and then moved and did their film like, you know, out west or something. I don't even know. But I didn't do it. I didn't ultimately do it. And but I knew that if I did do the job, I was probably going to get some check. And maybe it was 10 grand, maybe it was 20, maybe it was 100 grand. I didn't know what it was, you know. So I was like, okay, well, I can't put it, you know, to my name. So I'm just going to create this corporation, this little company. And I called it Prosthetic Renaissance. And it basically was just in case I got a job, I could have checks written to that company. You know? And that basically company sat dormant for like years until I got like a real job on my own. But I had already set it up with an accountant and all that kind of thing.
I was ready to rock and roll. So what was the first job that Prosthetic Renaissance did?
The first job I actually completely handled was in 2004 or 3 or 4. It was a film with Willem Dafoe. It was called Animorph.
Okay.
And it was a New York director named Henry Miller. And the production designer was Jack DeGovia, and who was the president of the Art Directors Guild. He was also a production designer for Die Hard and all these movies. Yeah. And they had called me somehow. I don't even know how they got my name, but they got my name. I went in for an interview and I read the script, and there were like these fake bodies in it. And I went to the first meeting. It was with the director and it was with Jack because, you know, he was the artistic eyes. And he was like, okay, well, you know, let's see who we have here. So I think they were interviewing like makeup people, makeup effects people. And I went in and I brought this fake head that I had made of my friend. And I came in, and director, oh, hey, nice, blah, blah, blah. And, it was like, this is a bullshit meeting. We don't care, it's whatever. And then they saw this head that I made. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute, what is this? Like, what the hell is this? And I had done this little like half head that I did all the hair work. I punched all the eyebrows. I painted it. I did everything to it. And Jack DeGovia, the production designer, looked at it and was like, holy shit, this is really realistic. I can't even tell that it's fake. And, I knew he had a good eye. So I left the meeting. Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And I gave them a budget. And supposedly, from what I know later on, is that my budget was higher than everyone else's budget. And Jack had come into the meeting with the producers and he goes, okay, if you want the cheapest person, then hire them. He goes, but if you want the best stuff, I think you should hire this kid. And he goes, because that kid isn't, he goes, that head that he made and he brought in here was not a fake head. He goes, that was art. And he goes, and that is the future of this business, that kid. And I was like, holy shit, that was so nice.
Yeah.
He told me later. And that was what really drove them to hire me to do the job, because of his vouching for me and saying that, this kid's going to do an awesome job for us. And it was just like a passion project for them. They had like a great DP and a great production designer, and it was like a really low budget film. Which was a cool movie. It was a little weird, but it was like Seven. It was like a movie that was about a serial killer who like used body parts and things for his art, kind of like made like Francis Bacon type art out of body parts, and they shot it all cool and weird. So there was a guy that was like completely dismembered and they're like hung from the ceiling, and then the shadow of the body parts cast this other image on a wall, and it was all this weird shit. And I built all this stuff in my new garage that my dad built. And we made these hyper-realistic nude bodies, 3 of them, for the film. And it was literally just me, my friend Jerry Constantine, and one other guy that was friends with Jerry. His name was Tim Jarvis. He came out for a very small period of time to help seam the silicone bodies with us. And it was literally 17-hour days, 7 days a week, all through the holidays, everything that me and Jerry killed ourselves to make these bodies for. And that was the first job we did. And it was cool because the bodies still look pretty good. We tried our best. All the culmination of all the years of learning and all that paid off. And that was the first job. And ever since 2004, I don't think I've spent longer than like a month without a job.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, yeah, your resume shows that you've been busy and doing some amazing stuff.
I'm really tired, Jamie.
Stop it.
I'm so tired. I'm so burnt out. You don't even know.
You can't say that.
this let me tell you, this break we're all having is so good for me.
Thing. Yeah.
Because for the first time in 15 years, I am alone and quiet and going to the gym and just enjoying my life for a second.
Yeah, living life.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's awesome. You're like, exhale.
Oh,
okay.
Serious. I tell you.
But I just wanted to get into the beautiful aging work that you have done on multiple actors. Like Ewan McGregor, Ben Stiller, Kristen Wiig, Nicole Kidman, Jennifer Connelly. Who else am I missing? Oh, the aging that you did on the True Detective. That was a great situation also. I enjoyed.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I feel like I don't know if you have a favorite thing that you do, but I feel like your realism stuff, is that what you would call it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Is pretty phenomenal.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
I mean, it was the harder thing to do, I would imagine, if you've got something like creature gore, which I'm not saying is easy, through to, trying to do those subtle aging lines on somebody. It's this, it's a real talent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're all, difficult in their own specific way, whether it be a fantasy creature or something strange or a hyper realistic thing. I think are just the choices that we make as artists to kind of discern the best approach. And that's definitely something I learned from Dick Smith, because I love Dick Smith's fantasy stuff, things like Ghost Story and things he did that were not hyper realistic age makeups. I think the fantasy work that he's done was so cool too, just as good, but he just didn't have the chance to do many of them. We take each job the same. We treat it the same, whether it be hyper realistic thing. Okay, what's the best approach? If it's a creature or some weird, effect, what's the best way to do it? And do we have time? Do we have a budget to do it properly? So we really try to break it down as to what the approach will be, and just kind of like Dick would do, okay, we can get away with this. I don't want to have buckling in this eye area, so I don't want to put an appliance there, or I have to do a really super soft piece in that area so it moves better. So everything is thought out. Every piece of clay that goes on a life cast is thought about. Everything. So, for example, on True Detective, we matched every single crevice line. We made those areas that would naturally form wrinkles. You take a life cast and you get a dark, one light, and then you draw pencil lines on everything that you see that they may be an inclination that there may be a wrinkle on. So I go well, obviously that's going to move there. So I better follow some form of pattern of my sculpture to fit inside those areas. So when the guy or girl moves their face and they squint and move, that the sculpture can be thin in those areas or not have anything in those areas, so that the movement isn't hindered by the appliance. And I think that's so important to approach it that way, because it's not just me showing off this cool sculpture that I did. It's a moving sculpture. It's a real art form that is one of a kind. It is a moving sculpture on an actor, most of the time a famous person, who is hypersensitive about their face anyway. So can it look real? Will it not hinder them? All these things, go into my mind on designing a makeup, especially an old age makeup or any kind of makeup. So it's approached in that sense. And the fantasy thing, I approach the same way. Will it move? Can I get away with being super thick sculpture here, or can I get away with it? And guys like, Steve Wang and guys at ADI and all that, they really know where a suit is going to bend and move. And Steve Wang has all these awesome tricks on, if a guy leans over, he has to put this certain plastic ribbing inside so it doesn't crease and buckle in a weird way. And all those guys figured out all this stuff. So it's a completely, same materials, different mindset of approach, so, but I just try my best, and assess it one by one, and I think that's all we can do, because we usually do get pigeonholed by producers or by filmmakers. But I would love to make weird creatures and fantasy stuff and all that, just sometimes get more jobs to do realistic makeup, so.
Yeah. I think what you were saying about when you are, you've done that cast and you are just, you're just enhancing what could already be there as far as aging goes, instead of redesigning the face.
Yeah, right. And then there's also that I always leave the window open to, okay, yes, I need to be here and I kind of need to be strict in a sense, but at the same time, how far can I possibly push it in design so that I can get away with more drama? So drama is so important in designing a makeup. How many seconds is this going to be on camera? Can I get away with more? Or is it going to be something that's filmed in close-up for, 40 shooting days? Rob Bottin, he would sculpt a crazy thing that there's no way it's going to move good, but you're only going to see it on film for half a second. So I'm going to sculpt this crazy neck that's exploding and weird, that'll never move properly, but it's designed to be shot in a certain way. Yeah. And how far can you mix aesthetically pleasing crazy stuff within a boundary of realism?
Oh, that's very cool. Hey, now something that caught my eye on your website was a makeup that you did on the Goldfinch with the scalp shaving with the wound, like the stapled wound
right.
on it. that just looked beautiful. And as a hair hag, I was wondering, I was just like zooming in on it, going where and how, because I know that you put that piece over top of the actress's existing hair, like wrapped it flat on the side. But then is the other half actually her hair?
Yeah, it is. So I life casted the girl with her hair completely tied up tight into a ponytail at the top. So I put a bald cap over that and just didn't flatten her hair. I just put a hole in the bald cap. I pulled the hair through a ponytail in the back. I life casted her that way. So the hair was already kind of tight, really tight. Because I didn't want to put her in the life cast through an hour-long process of flattening her hair because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it yet. So we tied it in a ponytail, did a bald cap, life cast her that way. And on top of that life cast, we shaved down the hydrocal plaster part a significant amount, maybe a quarter inch or a little bit less, maybe an eighth of an inch down further, because silicone stretches. Unlike foam latex, which shrinks and you have to have something larger, silicone stretches when it's thin. So if you sculpt something and then cast it in silicone, it may be in a different location when it's really thin and soft later and not line up. So knowing that going in, we shaved down the girl's life cast significantly to compensate for that possible stretching. And then I sculpted a piece on the one side that first I did a Photoshop just to show the director of the design, get some ideas. And then I had sculpted the piece on that shaved down life cast and then took the piece off, made a syntactic epoxy mold, which is the most accurate and less shrinking of a mold material, made the sculpture. And then a guy that works for us, Izzy Galindo, he was one of my students who we kept in the studio because he's really talented. He did these tiny little bumps of texture on my sculpture because, to be honest, the texturing thing, I can't focus on it anymore. I mean, I've done so many times, and there's guys that just are girls. They're so good at doing textures that I just don't have the patience anymore. I'm like dealing with like a fire being put out somewhere. And it's like, okay, well, you can do this really well and I'll be supervising it. So you texture it. So I usually have that happen. So Izzy textured that piece with these little bumps, like as if the head was shaved. He did this really beautiful job. And then we made a mold. We cast it in silicone. Now I have my piece. I pre-painted quickly. When I life cast, I do like a color sample with silicone to make sure, and I photograph it. I make sure that the color is in the realm that I want it to be. So we cast the piece out. I knew it would be a certain color. I knew the opacity needed to be a little bit more because from underneath, if you're covering dark hair of any kind, it's going to show through the silicone. So it can't be too translucent. So you have to play around with it. And in order to do that right, it has to be the right level of opacity. And then what we did was Izzy also had punched in one by one hairs into the silicone piece to a certain point and cut it really short. So I had multiple versions of appliances that were half head pieces that were ready to go. And then on the day, I and Mandy Lyons, hairdresser, great hairdresser, flattened her hair with me along with the actress. We flattened it in a very specific direction, down and up and over, and on a very specific line. She kept shifting the line, the part in the hair where the appliance ended. So when it was flattened, I said, okay, move the gaff-quat hair flattening part over just a quarter of an inch more. So we lined up the piece with her hair so exactly, and the hair was flattened. The hair flattening took about an hour. So once that was done, I knew I could glue that piece right over that. Before that, I sprayed Skin Illustrator over the gaff-quat to blank out as much as I could her dark hair color. Yeah. So I didn't want it shining through. So I did that, and then I put the piece over it, glued it on, blended it, matched paint. And once that was all done, Izzy made a little piece, very small strip of red hair that was maybe 1 inch wide or half an inch, that sat on the edge of that appliance and combed into the rest of her hair.
Right. So like a lace piece or a silicone piece with hair. Oh, a lace piece.
It was a lace piece that we cut all the lace off of it entirely. And it was like just where it faded, where it needed to go. So that just was an extra bit to tie in the blend.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. It was tricky, and lucky we had a great young actress who was, patient to have us kind of stretch her head around and blow dry it and, flatten it and then glue all over it.
I'm sure once she saw it, she was like, yep, that was worth it.
It was really crazy. She loved it. And it was disturbing. People were really disturbed on set, and it had an emotional impact. So that's what we try to do. We try to help the story along and not really showcase too much of our skills and try to blend in with the story, and have it be as real as it needs to be in the tone of the film, So that's another thing too, is the tone of the film. If the film was like, Terry Gilliam thing, obviously we can go like crazy, but if it's something that's in a setting of the tone of the film is hyper realistic, then we have to stay within that boundary. So we did it, and it actually is really cool. It looks like this cool punk hairstyle,
I was gonna say she looks like the ultimate punk. That's had her head cut open and she stapled it back up and she's back off to the gig to party. Yeah, it's
awesome.
Amazing.
Love it.
Now, tell me, how did you get involved with Martin Scorsese with The Irishman?
The Irishman, that was Nikki Lederman, who was department heading the job, and I've worked with Nikki Lederman on, I think the first job we did was Boardwalk Empire. I had done the pilot with Martin Scorsese. I had done all the effects for that pilot, and I had done the first series of effects for the first season and I think a portion of the second season, and then I ultimately left that show.
It was a great show.
Due to, just being busy and whatever.
Yeah.
So I worked with Marty before, and we got along, and, I had made a fake body for Boardwalk pilot, and he loved the body. I had it like in my car, and he kept asking me to take it out and like show his friends and put it on the floor, and, they were all like looking at it. So he knew me and liked me, and he was awesome. I mean, that director is so cool. On the first Boardwalk meeting I had, I sat in his office with him, and he was like, okay, what do you think this should be? And I said, well, I think this should be like this and this and this. He goes, well, okay, yeah, I like that. And then I said, well, what about this one? What about this killing? Oh, I'm never going to show it. I'm going to show it from behind, and blah, blah, blah. He knew everything he was already going to film.
Oh,
so
awesome.
We kind of designed some of the things in it like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. So we'll focus on these few things. And he knows he's not going to shoot this. And we know we need a body to be inside this fishing net, and it's going to come out of the water and land and perform in a very specific way. So I was like, man, that's really cool. Like, he's asking me what I think. Because I think that's a good director. That's someone who's like, okay, I'm hiring good people. I'm hiring experts. What do they think? Sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes that doesn't work, But I think that he's hired some really great people over the years, and I thought that was really cool. But Nikki Lederman was doing The Irishman, and there are a few makeups that, they could handle and they could do themselves. And I was only really responsible for one makeup in that film, which was a guy named Fat Turney Salerno, which an actor, Dominic Lombardozzi, had played. And he was a really good actor and had this really cool specific voice. And but he was playing an older person. He was playing like a 65 to an 80-year-old guy. And even though the acting is great, there's only so much you can do without prosthetics or some kind of effect to change that. So Marty let us do that. And then we did a test. And on the test, the actor came up to Marty, and he's like, hey, man. And Marty was really confused. And he was like, yes, can I help you? And he said, no, it's me, Dominic. And he's like, Dominic, holy shit. He goes, holy shit. He goes, that's great. Okay, perfect. And then we made no changes. So that's how that worked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was so lucky. And then we did this really crazy, elaborate makeup in the film. And they filmed it, pretty good amount. And it was fun. It was fun to work on that film. It's a great film. The production design is amazing. And, it was great.
That's pretty cool. Hey, now with that film being, notable in its use for the digital de-aging stuff, and then I guess for years, makeup effects artists have kind of had that fear of being replaced by CGI. I'm sure people have moved away from that fear now as we kind of find our practical footing in a digital era. But have you done a project where you know that your work will have digital adjustments done to it afterwards? Does that affect the way you design the prosthetic or the makeup?
Yeah, well, I make believe digital effects don't exist.
Yeah.
So if Rick Baker can do a makeup amazing back in the day, or if Rob Bottin or Stan Winston or Kevin Yeager could do like a killer realistic makeup back in the day before digital effects, then why can't I? Even though our cameras are crazier and all that kind of thing, it just drives you even more to try not to mess it up and to plan more. So I make believe they don't exist. So that's the approach I always go with, because I know it. I've done makeups where you can't tell where the edge is or you can't see it. So why would I need to rely on a VFX company to fix that? So if it needs to be fixed, I'm all for it. But that's in a circumstance not due to negligence. So, and not due to design. That may be something like an actor totally fucked it up, or the paint totally came off of it, or it ripped, or someone wasn't careful with it, or the mouth was torn because they left the guy in the makeup trailer for 20 hours before they filmed him, which happens all the time.
Yeah, then we're like, we've got 2 minutes to get this, and you're like, I'm sorry, what now?
yeah, exactly. A guy or girl, they're sitting in a makeup trailer. You do a makeup early in the morning. They're sitting there for 10 hours. And then they go to set and they film this hyper close up. It's like, hey, assholes, you're fucking this up. You're deliberately fucking this up. So, but they don't care. They don't care. And most of the time don't listen. So thank God there's digital things when you need it, but you can't go in designing something quickly or haphazardly knowing that, it's just going to get fixed digitally later. I think that's a fail in design. And we are better than that. We should not rely on that. So
absolutely,
we should be saved by that because that's a tool to help the illusion. So there's great things like taking lace away that we can't take away sometimes, or something happened, a shininess or whatever. Like those are awesome things. And I know Bill Corso has this really cool digital company that he supervises because he's a makeup person, and sometimes the digital people don't see what we see.
Yeah.
So having
it's a different understanding, isn't it?
Right. He knows what he's looking for, like, the lace here, or the edge of the appliance, or the coloration. So that's awesome. If Bill is on your movie doing digital fixes, you know that 99.9% of the time it's going to look like, make your work look even better, So
yeah. Is that something you've ever been involved in post-production?
Not really. I mean, I would love to, maybe in the future, but I haven't had too much need for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even though I would love to edit the movie, but I've, seriously, like look at all the makeup scenes. I always ask and I always say, please, can I see the footage before you put it to print? Because I have the eye to see where my errors may be, and maybe someone else doesn't. But once you wrap, sometimes you just disappear and they don't care. And there's a deal with some visual effects company that they have already in place that they don't care and they don't show you anything later. So
they've just moved on.
Really difficult. And I feel like that's an issue that we all need to be involved with a little bit more. Like, how can we make our work look as good as possible and to help production instead of hinder it?
Keep that communication open right through.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So I'm just wondering, like, have you done a makeup that, when I was saying before about being adjusted afterwards, I guess it's kind of like those makeups that are a mash of both. So you do the practical, but then from the get-go that the design and post is to add something visually, like effects-wise, afterwards. Have you had an experience with that?
Totally. Yeah, just did a few times in the past, but the most recent one was a TV series with Mark Ruffalo. It just came out. It's called I Know This Much Is True. It's a very intense, kind of depressing, strange series.
Oh, with Derek. With Derek.
Yeah. And you know Derek. You worked with Derek with me in New Zealand, which was a really cool thing for me, even though you're probably bored of New Zealand, but I love New Zealand.
I'm glad.
but we did all the effects for Derek's series that he directed, all of them. It was very difficult filming upstate New York in the middle of nowhere, and some, nameless actors were extremely difficult, and some were really amazing. Obviously, Mark is amazing, and it was great. But I had designed one thing where he supposedly cuts his hand off in the film, and I suggested to them, hey, why don't we do this? Go through the script. I said, why don't we do this? I hate when you see an amputated thing and it looks like a guy is holding this glove over his fist. It's been done in the past over the years.
And his arm looks weirdly long.
Yeah, really long. And it's rarely done. It's rarely done these days, but it happens, especially for TV. So I said, let me design this thing where we can life cast Mark's arm bent, and then I can sculpt this stump on the end of it to look like it's really amputated, and then we can erase the bottom of his hand off entirely via, digital help.
Okay.
So that was designed that way, knowing going in that they were going to erase his own hand. So how they do that, they would film a clean plate or something and then film that over and over again. And back in the day, it used to be on a motion control camera where you used to have the camera locked and on a computer, and then film each single take the same camera motion so that you can film a blank one and then film the one with the actor, and then you have the exact information for where you need to erase. But now with tracking software, they can just film it, similar, and then they could find the place in the background that they need to erase for those frames. So it's really cool technology. But we did that for him, and we erased his hand, and that was a collaboration going in. And I had also done some euthanizing makeups for not killing people, but making people younger to make them look more youthful. So I had made some appliances for some older actors to completely wipe out any hanging skin or folds, some eye areas, some cheeks, things like that. I filled in a lot of areas to take away the wrinkles and make them look younger. And then later on, digitally, they enhanced that even more.
Oh, wow.
And Derek loves to photograph what he's doing. So he doesn't like having a completely digital entity there because he can't see it and he can't feel it and all of that. And he's a very emotional filmmaker that way.
Yeah.
So we did that, and the visual effects guy just kind of swiped up a couple other areas, and then they used it, and it was minimal digital work. And that visual effects supervisor preferred it that way because on top of a million other things he was doing, composite shots and all these other things, it was more helpful to them to erase and to clean up and move around than it was to just be entirely digital.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a combination. It's really a combination of departments. It's like a band. I mean, I look at a film as like a rock band or something. You have a guitar player and a bass player and a singer and a drummer and whatever other instrument, and everybody has to work together to create that song. But when there's a big divide between the bass player and the guitar player or the singer or whatever, it's like they quit and it gets all fucked up and the music sucks,
Yeah.
So and that's what happens with films. It's like, the visual effects people don't want to talk to us, or they don't want to be a part of it. They want to do it and they want to do this. And it's like, that never works.
Yeah.
So I'm all for communicating.
Teamwork. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, I just wanted to speak about you getting Heidi Klum ready for Halloween each year as well. How did this all come about? Because it's pretty amazing.
She's great. I love Heidi. She has wild ideas for her Halloween costumes, and we usually spend so much time and money making them that after Halloween, we collapse, all of us, literally collapse, because we always try to go in early to figure out what we're going to do, but it never happens. So it always winds up being some sort of emergency scenario where we're up to the last night of, building and, going in and then doing this crazy thing. And then she wants to film it and put it on TV. So,
okay. We don't need to talk about it at all.
No, it's cool.
It just sounds like a nightmare.
Oh, no, my God. Jamie, you don't even know. I mean, this year she wanted to film it live, the whole process, not only inside a New York City storefront, but also air it live. And when you don't sleep for 4 days, you don't really look that hot, or feel great. So.
Oh my goodness.
But I love Heidi, and I
Yeah.
only had that job because Bill Corso was doing that job before. And since the party was in New York and she was living in New York at a certain period of time, Bill was like, I am so busy doing this stuff. Why don't you just hire Mike? So Bill passed that job to us, which was really nice. And
That's cool.
and we've been doing it pretty much every year. And it's fun. It really is fun. I mean, we duplicated Rick Baker's Thriller werewolf makeup, and that was really an honor because that was like what got me into the industry in the first place. And Rick Baker is a genius and like the best makeup artist ever. And like even to duplicate that makeup is like impossible. And it was just so hard to do. And I remember I told Rick, I said, hey man, like we're doing this Michael Jackson Thriller on Heidi Klum and, don't kill me, I hope don't rip it
Don't kill
apart.
me. Don't judge me. Don't
Judge me. So it's hard. She doesn't have the same face as Michael and blah, blah, blah. And then he was really awesome and he helped recommend like what to do. I sent him photos of me and, Mike Fontaine had worked on it. I had sculpted the hands and the face with Mike and we sent pictures to Rick and Rick was like, yeah, it looks really good, guys. Like it looks awesome. But I think the ears, maybe you can move them down a little. And we were like, okay, all right, thanks, man. And we looked at it and we're like, I don't know if he's right. Is he right? Let's look at his photos. So then we move the ears and we're like, oh, he's fucking right. We're idiots. So of course Rick knows. Fuck. Yeah. So we moved the ears and that was like really cool and helpful of him to do that. And we not only did the werewolf makeup on Heidi that year, we also duplicated all like as close as we could anyway with masks, not makeup, masks for all the zombies too. We tried to do some of the key like hero zombies as masks. There's like a big blue bald Tor Johnson guy. We did that, and we did this skeleton guy that Tom Hester designed and made at Rick's at the time, and we duplicated that, and Mike sculpted that. And it was like we did all these. We tried to even make the zombies look like Rick's work. So that was
cool.
Fun.
Yeah, hard work but fun.
Yeah, that's usually how it is, and
I think so.
And that's how movies are, If younger people want to do this kind of thing, it's like you can do awesome stuff and you can work really hard and kick ass and all that, but it's so draining. It's so much hard work. And a lot of the time, even if your budget is good, it gets eaten away, So make sure you don't bid too low because it just dissolves. The money dissolves, and you could see in the past of any makeup effects company, like some studios benefited greatly and some studios went bankrupt, and so it's really important to know what to bid and why, and if they can't pay for it, a lot of the time you can't do it.
Yeah, it's okay to walk away.
It's okay to walk away. Someone else maybe unfortunately gets to do it, and maybe they have a better solution than I do or something, or a better approach that could save money, but that's just not what I want to do.
Yeah. And you got to love it, man. You got to love this job, because if you don't, it'd be torture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to love it. I mean, I still love everything Rick Baker ever did. I still love everything Bottin did, and Kevin Yeager and Greg Cannon. I mean, it's like I still look at that work that they struggled and made all these years, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. I still love all of it. It's
still inspired by it. That's very cool.
Great. And all those people a lot of the people that were working then are still working now, which is even better for me because I'm a total geek, and it's like, oh my God, Norman Cabrera, awesome. I used to love his stuff. And, Bill Corso, crap. I used to put pictures of his stuff on my wall as a kid.
Yeah.
And like all this stuff. And, oh my God, Sylvia Nava is making the wig and she did everything for Rick Baker. And it's just like, I'm living a fantasy, my childhood fantasy of still working with, those artists who are still in the industry. And I have so much respect for all of them because I know how hard it's been all these years to do that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So what have you got coming out that we can look forward to seeing? What have you been working on?
Well, probably the best job I ever had in my life was Coming to America 2.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it was really awesome. I mean, another Rick Baker, genius movie, genius design. And I can't take any credit for really designing any of those makeups other than a few new characters we did, which are not in the original film. But Rick was retired and, doesn't have a studio anymore. And the job fortunately came our way. And, We got the job, and we really tried our best to analyze everything in the film, from every wrinkle, every line, everything. And, Eddie Murphy's still playing all the characters, and Arsenio is too. And that was awesome. I was so psyched to do that job, because that was like my favorite movie, because that movie's like so funny. And I love John Landis, and it's like total Rick Baker, and it has a combination of like a Dick Smith makeup that like Rick Baker did, so it's like shit, like this is so cool. It's like total fantasy. It has the best of every world for me, and working with Eddie Murphy, which was really crazy, but, so the idea was going in with those approaches of the makeups was like, okay, can we analyze every wrinkle and everything that Rick had done already and take into the account that Eddie is physically older and heavier, and he doesn't look like that 25-year-old kid anymore.
Yeah.
So we made a conscious choice to make the makeups look older, as if those characters were still alive and aged like 30 years.
Ah, cool.
So we did that. So we aged everybody in the film according to Rick's designs, and then added our own assumption of how much older they would look. Are their hair grayer? Is their skin saggier? Is they fatter? All that. Are they more bald? All that stuff. So I think it's going to be really fun and exciting, and I hope people like it. And
I'm looking forward to it.
It was really fun, and we did some really awesome new characters that I'm really proud of. And I think it's just a cool script, and it's going to be a cool movie.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're a kid in a candy store. I love it.
Oh, that was the best. That was the best. And then we're working on Batman now, and we're doing some makeups for that. I won't say what they are, but if you really care, you can do some research and find out what's going on. But we're doing some really cool original character makeups in the film, and they're so exciting to do, and it's a great, exciting project to work on. And the director's awesome. His name's Matt Reeves. He did all the Planet of the Apes films, the new ones.
Nice.
And he's really cool. He's a fan of effects. He's a big fan of effects. So
that's nice.
It's been good.
I just want to know, what one tool or product would you not want to work without?
What product? In the makeup trailer or in the studio?
Either one.
Okay, I love Chavant clay. I love Chavant soft tan clay, which a lot of people, I know they use medium. But we developed kind of a way of sculpting that we use the soft material for certain things. Sometimes we're like, oh, medium's really better for this. But the soft clay has a really great quality to it. It has a tendency to kind of move around and shift things really easily. And I like to use my hands a lot when I'm sculpting a makeup, and as little tools as possible. So that's something I wouldn't want to work without if I had to choose. And probably in the makeup trailer, I love to airbrush makeups. I rarely kind of hand brush and do that stuff, which I also do, but maybe after I've already airbrushed the bulk of the makeup.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to be without an Iwata. So I use an Iwata HPC or an Iwata Micron, mostly the HPC. And then I kind of break it in a way. I don't use it traditionally. I break it in a way where I kind of rip the tips off of it, and I expose the needle, and then I pull the needle back a certain length, and then my paint is thinned a certain way, and then I spatter and do all these things with like this kind of, MacGyvered, broken down, airbrush.
So you take that away from you, and you're like, ah.
Yeah, then I would suck. It wouldn't be good. I can only rely on the tools I have, so what I've learned on.
That's awesome.
So. But, look, a lot of it is intuitive.
Yeah.
So it's about adapting. And that's one thing I learned from Rick Baker. And that's one thing I learned from Dick Smith, was like, if their plan A fails, there's plan B. If plan B fails, there's plan C. And if plan C fails, there's plan D. On and on and on.
Just keep going.
Yeah, there's no way to not do it. There's always a way to do it somehow.
You got to make it work.
So that's a good thing. So if I didn't have those tools, I'd probably find a way to do it. But I like having them.
Exactly. Those comforts.
Yeah, exactly.
And who is the one person you'd like to hear on the podcast?
Oh, man, that's everybody.
Terrible question.
Jeez, so many people. All right, I'm going to be geek and go into the effects world and I would love, I don't know if it would ever be possible, I would love if Rob Bottin did an interview with you.
Dude, you're like the second person to say that. And I'm like, is this like the biggest challenge of my life is to try and
You should. I wish.
Oh my goodness.
I wish.
Okay.
I mean, I also, all right, let's go second round. Because everybody wants to hear Rob. I would say like really, man, I would say like Kevin Yeager.
Okay.
I would love to hear Kevin Yeager do a long interview where you pick his brain and pry it open and really ask him questions that he's never been asked. Like, okay, like tell me about designing a Crypt Keeper and Freddy and, all Child's Play, the original one, all that stuff. I would love to just know some things,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've given me some homework, Mike. Thank you very much. Hey, thanks, Mike. It's been awesome chatting with you.
So good to talk to you, and hopefully we can work together again soon.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks.
All right, Jamie, I'll talk to you soon.
For links to see more about our guests, go to our Instagram at The Last Looks Podcast or our website, thelastlookspodcast.com. If you want to keep up with new episodes being released, be sure to subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, or any podcast streaming platform. And remember, if you're enjoying the show, share it. The Last Looks Podcast would like to thank Brett Stanley and Sabrina Castro. The song Fun Time by DJ Quads. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
That's a wrap, people.